Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. So happy to have each and every one of you back here today, and super excited to have my guest. Today we've got Sally Guillaume. She's the founder of Undiscovered Mountains. Sally, did I say your last name right?
You did, yes. Thank you. Hi, Jason.
It's so nice to have you here. And I introduced you as, the founder of Undiscovered Mountains. But right before we pushed the button, I had asked you about that because I know you're in France and sometimes you use the France as part of the title of your company. And I'm only saying that so if someone sees Undiscovered Mountains France somewhere, they make the connection, probably the same person. Sally, just real quick, I guess I already mentioned you're in France. Is that right? You're on the call from France right now, right? Where you live?
Yeah. So I'm in the Southern French Alps in a town, near to a town called Gap, which is the southern edge of the Écrin National Park for people that know the French mountains. And that's where our Undiscovered Mountains is based. So we're based in this southern part of the French Alps.
Very cool. We're going to discuss a bit about kind of how you got from where you were to where you are now. And before we do that, let's give our listeners kind of a clear idea of what you do with Undiscovered Mountains. What is Undiscovered Mountains? Maybe the 30, 60-second elevator pitch, and then we're going to dig into how it came about.
Okay, so we basically organise all different types of adventures in the mountains in the Southern French Alps. So in the summer, we don't do kind of the mass tourism-y type things like ski holidays. So we try to do everything that is not that. So it's more things like in the winter, ski touring, cross-country skiing, winter multi-activity holidays, snowshoeing holidays. And then in the summer, we do, not just the summer, from the spring right through to the autumn, because our whole thing is about trying to be kind of 4 seasons. So we do walking, biking, cycling, via ferrata, climbing, mountaineering, canyoning, horse riding, multi-activity. So basically anything that you can do in the Southern French Alps, we do.
I was going to ask you, I was like, well, other than ski, well, you mentioned skiing, but on 2 different kind of sides of that. One is the typical ski holiday that you think of, people go to the ski resorts and downhill skiing and all that stuff. You don't do that, but you do the cross-country skiing and probably
ski touring, backcountry skiing, you probably think of it as in the States, yeah.
Is when you say, I'm just curious because I grew up in the Rocky Mountains and I had a lot of friends that were into, they would call it backcountry stuff, but they would like throw downhill skis on their back and climb up to the top of a mountain and then ski down. But there's also cross-country skiing. So when you say backcountry skiing, what's your definition of that?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a semantic thing and it depends where you come from. But basically, for me, and in kind of Europe, cross-country skiing is relatively flat on skinny skis. So in the Winter Olympics, you can see people doing skating. So there's a skating style and then a classic style where you do one in front of the other in like tracks. You've probably seen that. Yeah. So that's what I would call cross-country skiing. And then you've got ski touring, which is like what you probably know of as backcountry skiing, which is where you have skis that look like downhill skis and you stick skins on the back and then you walk up the hill wearing the skis with your heel out and then you take the skins off, stick your heel in and you ski down when you get to the top. But it's all off-piste. It's not in resorts. Yeah.
Okay.
So you get really away from, So I suppose it's all the sort of alternative winter activities to the sort of downhill. We do downhill skiing, but it's just not our thing. It's not like our biggest, we try to focus on alternative stuff and also more natural stuff as well. So we also do a wolf tracking trip, which is quite a unique trip in the winter. We don't do it in the summer, we just do it in the winter. So yeah, I suppose it's just slightly alternative winter activities in the winter, and in the summer it's more classic what you'd think of in the mountains in the summer, all the different sort of activities that you can do.
Okay. And there's the activities that you mentioned, and I can kind of imagine that. You mentioned most of them probably quite specifically, but I also imagine if I was going to the Alps, there's probably fun food type of stuff, culinary experiences, the villages, stuff like that. So is that incorporated into most of what you do as well?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And we should do more about pushing that forward. But yeah, I mean, where we are is a very, very authentic part of the Alps. So it's not a mass tourism destination. It's not as well known as the Northern Alps. So, and we work with a lot of more boutique, locally run farmhouse type guest houses and locally run hotels who naturally have a passion for food and use local products, because that's kind of what this area is about. So when people come on a trip with us, it's part of the trip, like that kind of immersion in the local culture. But it's not something that we really promote. Actually, we should promote it more, but we don't. But yeah, it is definitely very, very, very much.
Well,
you come here and you're in someone's. We just don't work with big chains. So anywhere you stay is going to be unique. It's going to be like a special place that's just run by that family with their character and their way of doing things. And yeah, so that's the kind of feel, I suppose. And that's why I liked this part of the Alps, because when I first discovered it, that's what I felt about it. I felt this is a really authentic, real part of the Alps that people, when I first came here, which was 20 years ago, it was a real novelty to be English. Like there were no other English people here, or very, very few other English people here. Whereas, for example, at that time in the Northern Alps, not that I'm dissing the Northern Alps because it's got its qualities, you'd walk down the street in Morzine and you'd hear English being spoken. Well, that people here, that does not, there's no way. So I just felt like it was a lot more of a real, less of a tourist factory type place and more kind of off the beaten track. It's a little bit more difficult to get to, which is great because it means that, it's still off the beaten track, and it's still, people who come here appreciate that. But yeah, it definitely does have that feel of being how people imagine the Alps before it became overrun with tourists.
Yeah, I get you. I was going to ask you that directly, and then you pretty much just shared all that. So that's very cool. Where did most of your guests come from?
So most guests come from the UK, Holland, kind of Northern Europeans. And then we have a few guests that come from Canada and the States, some Australians, some South Africans. I mean, the website's in English and French, so obviously it attracts mainly English people. We don't do any marketing in France. We get the odd French person as well, but our main marketing is in English. So it's mainly, Anglophones from around the world. But I'd say a majority from England. And actually, just going back to what you said before, just a little anecdote, I suppose, talking about, why do people come here and the kind of quaintness of it. So we run cross-country skiing holidays, and we had a couple or family who came from Canada. And I was like, why are they coming from Canada, where you've got like hundreds of kilometers of cross-country ski piste to come and ski here in the Southern French Alps? So I asked them the question. I was like, why did you come here when you've got like the best cross-country skiing in the world in Canada? And she's like, well, it's not at all the same. It's completely different, because apparently I have now, but when I'd spoken to her, I'd never skied in Canada. And she said that when you go skiing in Canada, it's just in the forest and you just go for miles and miles and miles. But there's not the kind of like when you come here, where we are in the Southern French Alps, you start off in a village. So you're in a village and there's houses and there's a shop or a restaurant and there's a ski shop and you hire your skis and you go out and you've got mountains. You're not in the forest in a monotone sort of environment. It's you feel like you're much more in a kind of cozy, quaint village in the Alps and with the mountain scenery. So that was what they liked about it, and I'd never even thought about that. For me, that was just normal, you see. So that's, it kind of goes back to what you were saying before.
Yeah, I get that because, if I'm from Canada and I grew up there, I spend my life there, I probably go skiing there. It's a totally different thing to go do that in France. It's like everything. It's like everything. If you're into bicycling, maybe you live in Colorado and you like to ride your bike in the mountains, but the idea of going to, the Alps and riding your bike and staying in these quaint villages, it is a totally different experience. Still centered around an activity, but
there's so many other reasons to go besides just the activity. It sounds
Yeah,
like
exactly.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you access to a whole new culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna be straight. I really know nothing about the French Alps, and as someone from the States, I travel a lot. I've been to France. I haven't been to the French Alps, but honestly, if somebody said, I don't know, if I met somebody and they said, "Oh, I have always wanted to go to the French Alps," I would like, "What? Really?" Like, I'm not even sure. I would just assume the French Alps were the side of the Swiss Alps that were closest to France. I have no idea. This is just somebody from the States just sharing what I don't know about the French Alps. So I guess I'm where I'm going with this. It seems like maybe the marketing division of, Visit France hasn't done a great job talking about the French Alps, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to the US market.
No,
Because in the US we all know about the Swiss Alps. Or maybe the Italian Alps, but is that a challenge for you? Do you, like, if you speak to people from the States, or if you go to a show somewhere, or if you're traveling and you talk about the French Alps, do you get that kind of that weird look like, "Oh, what's the difference between the French Alps and the Swiss Alps?" Do you get that?
no, not so. Not, I've not really come across that. But then I suppose the shows that I'm going to, it's people that are
Europeans.
connoisseurs of mountains rather than just. But
Yeah, that's
but
true.
what we do get is people, when you say we're in the French Alps, they immediately think of Mont Blanc,
Okay.
Chamonix, and Morzine, which are the most promoted parts of the Alps, the French Alps. In the Aiguille de Midi and those kind of things, which might not mean anything to you, but if you're into mountain tourism, they would. My job when I go, when I'm hearing that, is to share, the difference between that part. I mean, we do actually do trips in that part of the Alps, but it's not our bread and butter, if you like. We're much more focused in the Southern French Alps, as I was saying before, which is, from Morzine, we're kind of like a 4-hour drive away south. So that's the
Okay.
difference. It's not that far, but it is far enough for it to be, you know, a different area, and it has a very different culture, because where our part of the Alps is right on the border also of Italy. So we share a border with Italy, and then further north is the border with Switzerland, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
But we're not in that. We're not in that. So our part of the Alps has a really strong Italian influence as well as the French influence, and it's further south. So we get the kind of, in the summer we get the Mediterranean climate, but in a mountainified. So it's warm and sunny. We don't get loads of rain in the summer. It's quite dry,
Okay.
but we get the heat storms at the end of the day, so it still stays green.
Okay.
But it's a really stable climate compared to, for example, in the Northern Alps. I keep going back to Northern Alps, where you can have 4 or 5 days of rain consecutive in the summer. That just doesn't happen in the Southern French Alps. And we've still got high altitude, so in the winter we've still got plenty of snow. Because that's another kind of thing. People think, oh, it's Southern French Alps, so there won't be any snow. Well, no, actually, that's not true. And we have some of the best cross-country skiing areas, because we've got high altitude cross-country ski areas in the Southern French Alps. So we, in the Queyras at 1,800 and 2,000 meters. So yeah, I mean, we're very blessed with a fantastic climate in the Southern French Alps, and that is one of the biggest selling points, I think, of the area.
You did a great job of telling me that I'm not your ideal client, which is a good
You're
thing.
very welcome.
Because you're right. You're like, well, when I speak to people that are into mountain sports and mountain stuff, then they all kind of get it. So that's good. I'm happy because I'm learning a lot. And I'm going to ask you another question that probably shows that is, even though I grew up in the Rocky Mountains and I've spent a lot of time in the mountains, but is it, obviously it's cold enough in the winter that it snows and the snow doesn't melt. But is it like super cold? Is it just cold enough to have good snow? Is it, I mean,
Oh, it can get really
compared,
cold. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it
yeah.
can, be like -20 in January.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
So,
that's rarer now than it used to be, but, with climate change and everything. I mean, the main difference, I don't know if you're going to ask me this question about climate change, but the main signs that we've seen here with regards to climate change is we're actually getting lots of snow, but the snow line is higher. So that where it changes from being snow to rain, if you like, is higher. That altitude is higher.
mhm, okay.
So some of the lower altitude ski resorts struggle. That's the same everywhere in Europe, and there have been closures all over Europe of lower altitude ski resorts. But that so far that hasn't actually affected us particularly because we're not really based in the ski resorts, if that makes sense. But it does affect tourism generally. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There is something that I I'm sure is in the Southern French Alps. I don't know. If not, you're going to tell me. But I grew up around hot air ballooning, and I've got a lot of people in my social networks, and I think they do quite a bit of ballooning in the Southern French Alps. Is that right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
That's really, no one's ever asked me that before, but yeah. In fact, where I where I live, just I can see it from where I live. And I'm looking out the window, I can see it. There's an aerodrome called Tallard, which is a famous aerodrome for all air sports like parachuting and all of that kind of stuff. And there's a hot air balloon company that start from there, and we often in the morning we see the hot air balloons out the window. Yeah. So yeah, it is.
I guess I do know one thing about the Southern French Alps, and I wasn't even sure, honestly. There used to be a tour operator back a long time ago when I was much younger that would do like week-long tours around the Alps in Europe, and it was called the Buddy Bombard Society, I think. I don't know if that rings a bell, but they used to, take a group for a week or so and go to different places and fly balloons, and I don't know. Anyway, so if I'm the first person that's asked about that, I take it's not a popular activity with your clients?
It's not in our portfolio, no. But people could ask us and we could organise it. Yeah. We've never.
I was just curious. It can create a challenge because it's very weather dependent. I don't know, maybe you have, ideal weather there, but that can be the challenge too of building that into an itinerary is, okay, we're going to do this Tuesday morning, and then the weather is not right, then it can be a challenging issue. So anyway, we're not here to talk about balloons, but very cool. But I suspect you also have like paragliding and because you mentioned some of the other aerial sports as well. So, all right, it's time to figure out how the heck you got there, because you'd mentioned a couple things 20 years ago, and you were, there weren't very many English people around. So let's go back and figure out how you got from wherever. Obviously, it wasn't France. So tell us, where are you from originally?
So I'm British, so from the UK. Not really from anywhere in the UK, because I moved around a lot, and actually also moved around to other countries as a child. So I lived in Norway and Denmark and America, actually in Miami and the UK, and in the UK in Scotland and England. So like kind of all over the place. But I probably spent the longest of my time in Manchester in the north of England as an adult before I moved to France.
Okay.
So that's where I'm from.
Because I suspect the childhood and the moving around had a lot to do with the choices you've made in your life. So let's discuss that more. What was going on that had you moving so much?
Well, so both my parents married and divorced probably 4 or 5 times each, and I kind of went around with different variations of them. And my dad worked in the oil industry at one point, and that's where Norway came in. Anyway, I won't bore you with the whole personal thing, but yeah, so moved around a lot. And yes, so living in Norway was probably my influence, where I realised where you have like I can remember walking to school in the snow and having this whole kind of thing about you arrive at school and you take your wet snowy shoes off, and you wear these woolly socks, and sliding down. Our school's on top of a hill, and everybody used to slide down the hill on a toboggan after school to get home. Mm-hmm. And jump on each other's toboggans and stuff, and snowball fights, and this kind of, and now I understand what it was. I think it was like a form of handball sport that I didn't really understand what it was at the time, that it was like rugby, but wasn't quite rugby in the snow. So yeah, all of these kind of like memories, and that's where I first ever tasted skiing, like cross-country skiing was in Norway. So I just discovered that I loved the snow and snow sports, which I'd never experienced in the UK, obviously. Mm-hmm. That was probably where I first had that kind of taste of, I want to live somewhere with a proper season, with a proper winter and a proper summer, because they have really good summers as well in Norway.
Right. Around what age were you in Norway? Just trying to get an idea.
Yeah, 12, 13, yeah.
Okay. And that can be a very influential time for most people. Whatever you're doing when you're around that age, that can be a big influence as well. When you first moved to Norway, did you like the winter, or did it take a while for you to kind of get used to it and enjoy it?
No, I think I loved it straight away. I think that's
Really?
where I was supposed to. Yeah. Yeah, and I still love the winter. And I love that feeling of the coldness on your face. Where everything's cold and fresh, but you're warm because you're dressed up. I like that, like that feeling.
I can see the look for anybody that's listening and not watching the video. Yeah, I can see the look on your face. That's very cool. You obviously like it. If we had a time machine and I could go back and met you when you're 12, and I said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" What do you think the answer would have been?
Oh my God, I don't know. Actually, I
Do
have
you
no
remember?
idea. Yeah, I definitely hadn't thought about running a travel company. It probably would have been, I don't know, what would I have wanted to be? I don't know. Probably a doctor
Do
or
you
something like.
remember? Yeah, do you remember at any point in your childhood thinking you wanted to do something? I mean, what did you want to do when you grew up? Do you remember? Do you have any specific memories of that? Not necessarily at
No,
12.
I
I'm
didn't.
just
Yeah, no, I don't. I had a real problem trying to decide what I was going to do when I grew up, as I was
okay.
growing up. So yeah, I started off. I kind of got into the outdoors. So moved back to England after being in Norway and Denmark, and kind of got into the outdoors at that point. Even though I'd been in the outdoors a bit and done skiing and stuff, I hadn't. When I went to the outdoors, I started going camping and hiking in the mountains and stuff in the UK. I'd never
Hmm.
really done that before, and that's when I
Okay.
sort of discovered that when I was in my late teens, and I thought, I love this. This is fabulous. This is me. And that's kind of when I started realizing, oh, I'd like to work in this field. So I ended up doing a course, which was it was a degree to be a teacher, a science teacher, and you did all of the outdoor qualifications at the same time. So you became a climbing instructor and a kayaking instructor and a mountain lead and all the kind of first entry level instructor qualifications. And the whole purpose of that degree was to be able to go into a school and be a science teacher, because obviously that's where your salary comes from, really, but then be able to do all the extracurricular activities like do the Duke of Edinburgh Award or run the climbing club or all of that kind of stuff. So that was
Oh,
what
okay.
that was the degree. So that was a 4 year degree. So I did that, um, and really enjoyed it. And then, of course, then I was a qualified teacher. So it was like, well, what do I do now? So then I became a teacher and did that for a bit, and sort of decided that I didn't really. Well, I quite like teaching. I do like teaching, and I have had some recent teaching experience here too in France in COVID, but kind of rediscovered, oh, actually, I do like this. But at the time, I didn't like it because it was all the paperwork and having to justify boring stuff about teaching. But anyway, decided I didn't want to do teaching. So then but I quite like this sharing of information, this kind of, so I ended up retraining to be a journalist, which I thought at the time would tick those boxes of being able to communicate, if you like, and share stories and stuff, but not have the pressure of having to do a lesson plan. So that
Sally,
was kind of.
let me ask you a couple of questions around this because this is fascinating. If at the time when you started that program, 4 year degree program to be a science teacher with all these other skills that you could use, kind of outdoor leadership skills, maybe we'd call them that. If you'd had the option of just doing 4 years outdoor leadership part without the training to be a teacher, but maybe it was a 4 year degree to be an outdoor leader to start your own tourism company somewhere, would you have chosen differently?
Yeah, possibly. And I did do a lot of outdoor instructing. I mean, I did do that, but I think the level that I was at, I wasn't, it was entry level. So to get to a kind of higher level would have required moving somewhere like the Alps at the time,
Mm.
and living in the mountains and doing proper, much more hardcore stuff than I was doing at the time. I didn't visualize that at the time. That wasn't kind of something that was accessible to me, or didn't think it was at the time. So that isn't the route that I went down. But yeah, maybe if different doors had been opened or different opportunities had been opened, then yeah, maybe potentially I would have gone down that route, but I didn't. So I went back. I went to be a journalist, and actually did. It was a broadcast journalism, so it was great actually, and I loved that job. It was a fantastic job, but I still had this yearning to live in the mountains. And
Hmm.
then I kind of went. I don't know if you know, when I was working in, you're working in TV. I was working for the BBC, So you're stuck in a city. You can't work in the BBC and live in the mountains. It just doesn't go
Doesn't work,
together.
does it? Yeah.
No. So there I'm like, oh, I did really like the job. It was a dream job. You know, it was really exciting. Lots of variety. You know, active, out and about, finding stories, that kind of stuff. I did enjoy that, but yeah, it was gnawing away at me that I couldn't be in the mountains. I mean, every weekend I was out going into the mountains, but you know, it wasn't my part of my daily life. And then, you know, getting a bit older, starting to think about having a family, and I'm thinking, right, no, I want to bring my family up in the mountains. I definitely want to do that. I don't want to bring them up in a city. So that was kind of like the turning point of like, right, we, you know, with my ex-husband, but at the time it was like, right, we need to think about how we're going to do this. And that was when the decision was made that we would move to the mountains to bring up our family. At that time, we were looking at all options. It was like, you know, New Zealand, the Lake District in the UK, the Alps, and the Alps won because it was the best mountains, but we didn't speak any French.
Okay.
So that was the big barrier, and it was the big sort of like, oh my God, are we going to be able to do this not speaking French? So that's kind of, we decided that that's what we were going to do. So we spent, and this was not something that we did quickly, that we spent quite a few years coming to the Alps, looking at different parts of the Alps, deciding where we were going to be. And we knew the Southern French Alps because my ex-husband is a big kayaker, whitewater kayaker, and it's a big area for whitewater kayaking. That's how we knew about the Southern French Alps. And we were, you know, when we came here, we're like, yeah, actually, this is so much nicer than the other parts of the Alps. You know, all of the things I was saying at the beginning of the podcast. And that's when we decided, no, this is, in fact, the actual day, the day of the decision. I can even remember the day of the decision. So we'd gone to go and look at an old building that could have been a potential bed and breakfast, and because that's what we thought we were going to do it originally. So we were there, and it was in a little village called Devilwy, and we'd gone to go and look at it, and we were staying in a bed and breakfast. And we didn't speak any French. So we were trying to talk to this woman in the bed and breakfast who didn't speak any English about the area and stuff, and it wasn't going anywhere. And she said, look, hang on. And she brought this person in called Mariana, who's now a really good friend. So Mariana was English, and she lived in this village. And so we said to Mariana, oh, you know, we're thinking of want to move to the Alps, want to set up a bed and breakfast. You know, what do you think? We're seeing this property. And she said, and we said what we thought we wanted to do and everything. And she said, no, I know where you need to go. You need to drive over the Col de Noyer, and you need to go to the Champsaur Valley, because you've got everything that you need there. You've got the white water, you've got the climbing, you've got all the things that we were interested in. So the next day we drove over the Col de Noyer, which is a famous Tour de France cycling col, so it's quite dramatic. And it was pretty dramatic. So we were like, wow, this is cool. And then arrived in Saint-Bonnet, which is the village, the first sort of village you come to. And I can just remember like arriving in the village, and there was a minibus like in front of us in the car park, and all these people getting out of the minibus, and there were ropes hanging out of rucksacks, and you know, walking boots dangling, and I just thought, oh yeah, this is it. And the village itself was just so beautiful. It was really, it's actually, now I know a bit more about the village. It's an old medieval Roman village, and it's still got remnants of that in there, like stone places where they would weigh their corn, stone things. Anyway, but so this village was really, really pretty, and I just thought, yeah, this is perfect. So we decided that was it. That was the place. And then
because I think that your story will inspire people. You know, I think there's a lot of people that are in a place doing a job that's just not right for them, and maybe it's for family reasons or whatever reasons they want to kind of leave everything behind and move to a new place. So my question, if you don't mind, is, were you still working for BBC? What were you doing back home while you were looking for the place? And how did you and your ex, do that? Honestly, just how did you do it?
It coincided with getting pregnant. So, basically, we made the decision that we wanted to make the move, and when we made that decision and we found where we wanted to be, it was a case of what we're going to do. And originally, our original plan was to set up a bed and breakfast, because that was what everybody did. There was a program on the telly at the time called No Going Back, and it was all about people doing that. So that was kind of our inspiration. Yeah. By the by, so I had my maternity leave, so that was the cushion of being able to move and have a little bit of a salary before, having nothing.
Yeah.
So that was the sort of cushion. But obviously then, of course, did come time with actually also having to look after a baby, which, was quite time consuming. So yeah.
They don't give you maternity leave so that you can leave the country. so
No, but
I
yeah,
get that. But
no.
good for you. You took advantage of it. Awesome.
So yeah, so we moved when I was on maternity leave. And we very quickly realised, because this was before Airbnb and booking and all the rest of it, when we started to think about, because we'd found this place we were going to invest in to do a bed and breakfast. But then when we started to look into it, we're thinking, well, where are we going to, nobody's heard of this place. Nobody's heard of the Southern French Alps. So where are we going to market this? No one's,
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we realised, actually, we don't want to do a bed and breakfast. We want to actually market this, sell this place and create trips here. Have a tour operator. There were no tour operators, basically. So that was it all started. So we ditched the bed and breakfast, and instead of having to invest all of our house sale into it cost us $2,000 to build a website, and that's how it started.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. And it makes sense, because if there are no tour operators and nobody knows the area, a bed and breakfast would be pretty hard. But at the time, it's hard to just. Now it's different, because people like yourselves came in and set up tour operations and helped get the word out there. And I'm sure the bed and breakfast owners in the valley really like that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a completely different world now with, now you just put it on booking and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But, or not just other places that you can put your thing. But yeah.
It's a different world for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different world. But yeah, so that was kind of how it started. So there we are. We arrived in Saint Bonnet. Annie was 4 months. That's our baby. She was 4 months old, and we literally arrived and had nothing. We'd sold our house and everything in the UK, and we arrived with nothing. Didn't speak a word of French, and
cool.
We ended up staying with a couple one of the very rare English-speaking people who actually still speaks to me in French, called a Scottish guy called Donald and Yes, who ran a bed and breakfast. They've now retired, but we stayed with them, and I lived in one of their rooms for like 6 months at the bed and breakfast, and they really helped, just learning French. Speaking to us in French and just helping me, because obviously I had no idea about tourism. I had absolutely no idea about anything to do with tourism or running a business or any of those things or speaking French. So it was all bringing up a baby.
All right,
everything was new. So
Sally,
it was
everybody that's listening to this right now wants me to ask the question: what was your ex-husband's background? What was he doing during this? Did he have any experience in any of this stuff? Was he enthusiastic about it? So tell us as much as you can about that to kind of help people understand what you guys were going through. So not everything, because I know he's your ex. We don't have to go into all the details.
No, I won't go into all of it. I'll be very brief. So he came from a retail background. So he was in retail, he worked for Aldi, if you know Aldi, the supermarket. So supermarket retail, basically. So he had no idea either. Didn't speak a word of French either. And basically, cutting a very, very long story short, we got divorced after a few months, and he went back to England, and I stayed.
Okay, all right. So it doesn't play that big of a role. I mean, it does.
No.
But...
So we it didn't work out. He went back to England, and then I was faced with this decision. I still had some maternity leave. I had 3 weeks of my maternity leave left, and I had this decision to make of, okay, we're getting divorced. I'm in France. I still don't speak French.
With the baby.
With a baby, Undiscovered Mountains, hadn't really done anything at that point. So what should I do? And I decided to stay, which was the right decision. Obviously, now I'm really happy that I made that decision, but it was a really hard decision at the time.
Yeah.
And I just thought I can't go back, because if I go back, I'll just always be thinking, well, what would have happened if I'd have stayed?
Yeah.
So I just couldn't go back. And
I'm curious, did you have people in your life back home trying to persuade you to choose differently or encouraging you? Because I imagine probably had friends and family back home saying, oh, you should come back and stay with us or whatever.
Yeah.
I suspect.
Lots of being pulled in lots of different directions, and everything. But I just knew, I've been dreaming about this for years. I was very, very, very sure that this is what I wanted. And I was determined that it was going to happen, basically.
Wow. That's powerful.
So yeah, but it was really hard. I think now, if you ask me if would I do it again, I would, because obviously I know the outcome. But would I go through that again? No, I wouldn't. It was really, really hard. I think that if I think about what is the emotion that I can remember feeling the most at that time, and I think actually it was loneliness. I was really, really lonely because I couldn't speak to anybody. Like the only person I could speak to was Donald, who insisted on speaking to me in French anyway, and he's a bloke, so it's not the same. And Mariana, who became a friend, the first Mariana that I met too. But other than that, I had nobody. And okay, you can speak to your friends on the phone, you can speak to your family on the phone, but they don't understand where you're at.
Oh, yeah.
Because changing, even, it's France and England. It's not like it's like a huge different culture or anything, but it is different. It is different. And there's a whole system to navigate, everything's, and the language, and just being able to express your emotions with a friend. There was no, on a kind of daily basis, and having a baby and all of the things, when you've got a new baby, there's a whole load of new emotions and things that you want to talk to people about, that I couldn't do that. I just didn't have anyone to do that with. So I think the hardest bit was being lonely, and then, and also not knowing what I was doing, and trying to, work it all out by myself. Like, because I couldn't even go to anything like a course or lessons or even at the time. And now you see there's loads of online stuff, but there was nothing like that at the time. You're kind of like, well, researching, how do you run a tour? What is a tour operator? How do you run? What insurance do I need? What is package travel regulations? What are all of these things?
How do I learn French?
Yeah, and also how do I learn French? And what are the rules in France? Are they different to the UK and Europe? And it was it was just very hard.
Sally, honestly, the question I want to ask you is, and I don't even know how you would answer it, but the question I want to ask you is, how did you do it? Do you know? Are you able to put your finger on how you managed to make it happen?
I think just having that dream, and wanting to make it happen. I think, and also, living here is just this, you're like, you can go out in the mountain. I can walk out in the mountains, like from my door. In the winter, I go skiing from, literally not from my door, but almost, and seeing the views, and wanting my children to have that, wanting them to be in this beautiful place and having clean air and being able to go skiing. And, there's like, just being really wanting that, just wanting it, like wanting to.
That's powerful. Yeah,
just wanting my kids, wanting Annie to be on skis when she's 3, and to go climbing, and of course you can do that in the UK. You can go on skiing holidays, and you can all of that, but it's just not the same as living in it.
Not the same, yeah. I guess the question is, what's the piece of advice that you wish somebody had given you, or what's the advice you would give to your past self? That, now in hindsight, looking back, and like, what's the advice you wish that you could have given yourself, or somebody would have given you when you were going through all this?
I think it would have been very good advice to go and get a job, although it would have been very difficult because I didn't speak French, but to go and get a job in France so that I had the security of a salary to do that first bit of learning French and understanding the system. Yeah. Because that was probably, that was the hardest bit. We try and having a conversation with an activity provider, and you're saying, okay, so, they don't speak English really, and you don't really speak French, and there wasn't Google Translate, and you're sort of trying to say, I'm going to sell your rafting. This is the price. I want a commission. What's a commission? So you're going to charge them more. No, I'm going to charge them the same, and you're going to give me it less.
Yeah. Negotiating all that stuff when you're not even, it's kind of new to you and you're figuring it out, and I suspect, right? God. Yeah. And also, this is, as I was saying before, it's a really, like, it's not a place now, it's evolved, but at the time that people didn't really work with tour operators. They hadn't actually understood they didn't actually know what commission was, for example. Right. Yeah.
Like, so that I mean, the whole thing has evolved so much. It's just
So it's interesting to me that the advice you said was get a job. I'm going to boil it down. I'm going to summarize it a little bit, but the advice would have been get a job. Were there people in your life at that time telling you, Sally, go get a job?
No, not really. No.
Oh, okay. Your parents are much more understanding than mine.
I don't think anybody said that. but I
Oh,
couldn't
okay.
get a job anyway. But there
Well,
wasn't a
yeah,
job
it would be very difficult.
available to me without speaking French, apart from cleaning or that kind of
Yeah,
job. But
yeah. They didn't
you
have
know,
remote jobs, so you couldn't.
didn't have remote
Yeah,
jobs.
yeah.
No. So, but yeah, now if somebody wanted to do that, I would say get a job with another tour operator.
Ah,
Learn the
okay.
ropes.
Yeah,
Learn
that
the
would.
ropes and learn how the industry works. Obviously, learn the language and do that with the security of having a salary, so you haven't got that pressure. I mean, I didn't earn anything, like
Yeah.
zero, for 5 years.
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
Because it was just so hard, I didn't know what I was doing, and I had a baby, and yeah, it was just so
Wow.
it was a very long slog.
I spoke with someone recently that kind of hinted at the same thing when she started her business, and she said, I just look back at it as an internship. I wasn't making money, but I learned a lot, and it's kind of like an internship. A 5-year long internship is difficult when you've got a child in a country you don't speak the language.
Yeah, and
How did?
also on your own. Like now,
Yeah.
the other advice I would say is like join. There's loads of networks now, of which I am in.
Hmm.
So go join these networks and go to these discussions. You can now go to like webinars with people in the same tourism industry as you from all over the world and listen to their problems and their hurdles
Well,
and what solutions they have. I mean,
yeah.
that's so valuable. Yeah.
It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of what we're doing right now. You and I are having a conversation that other tour operators and other people that aspire to do what you've done are listening to, and they can benefit from your story and hear the advice. And it is good advice because honestly, yeah, if someone came to me right now and said, Jason, I know you work with a lot of tour operators, you got a lot of experience in this. I want to start my own tourism business. I would probably say, well, have you worked in tourism? Have you worked for anybody
Yeah.
before? And if the answer is no, even with all these amazing resources, I would say you should go get a job with a tour operator, even if, even if it's an internship.
Yeah.
Do 2 years instead of, the 5 years that Sally had to do. Go do 2 years, not making any money, but
Learning it properly.
spending someone else's money, the mistakes you make, whatever it, and learn it properly, and you just get ahead that much quicker. So, all right, very cool. How did you end up learning French, other
Just
than just
by
necessity?
just being there, yeah, just trying to
Yeah.
just having to, the first languages, the first words were, I won't do it in French because you don't speak French, but
I get
baby, nappies, feeding time, bottle, those kind of conversations. And then, yeah, just gradually, I mean, I think it probably took me 3 years before I remember going to someone's 50th, a friend's 50th, and being it was like, it's horror. Oh my God, I've got to go to a group thing and like speak to lots of people. There's going to be lots of people talking. I'm not going to be able to understand anything. And I remember standing in like a group, it was outside, and there were 3 people having a conversation. I was in this group of 3 people having a conversation. I understood the whole conversation. I was like, yes. And not only did I understand the whole conversation, I was able to contribute to the conversation at the end. And I was like, yes, I've made it. I can speak French.
That's a big accomplishment because in my situation, I'm spending a lot of time in the Spanish world, and I'm learning Spanish basically the same way. I have some advantages. Obviously, I've got Google Translate when I need it, and I've got some apps on my phone. But I agree, like a one-on-one conversation I can get through because they know that I don't speak it very well. If they speak slowly, do pretty well one-on-one. But as soon as 1 or 2 other people join the conversation, especially
Yeah.
if they're all native Spanish speakers, it changes drastically. All of a sudden, all 3 of them are trying to speak to me. Just an example is, if I'm looking for a bus stop or something, I stop someone on the street and I think I'm doing just fine having the conversation with them. But as soon as they turn to somebody else and say, hey, this guy's looking for this, and then that person starts talking, and then someone else is walking by, and all of a sudden I've got 3 people trying to give me instructions, and I have no idea. It went from 90% understanding of what was going on to 0 really fast.
Yeah.
So
I've been there.
I'm acknowledging you. I would feel the same way if I had that moment of 3 other people.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I understand what they're talking about. So that's
Yeah.
very, very cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other big moment in terms of how I came to be here where I am now from there is when I met my now husband. So I'm now married to Bernard, Guillaume. obviously.
Uh-huh.
Hence my very Franco-English, Sally's like a really English name, and Guillaume is a really French name. So I really love that. I love the fact that I'm Sally Guillaume. Anyway, so Bernard I met him after after that kind of 3-year kind of period, and he's a guide. He's a mountain guide. So we met
Perfect.
because I had a group. So now I had clients, at last, and I had a group. I had a group of 4 people who were supposed to do a mountain called Les Ruilles, which is like a mountaineering summit, and there's a limit to how many people you can have with each guide. And so I had my guide Philippe, who'd been booked for ages. But then the group was 2 adult parents with adult parents, 2 parents with adult children, and the adult children wanted to bring their partners. So the group became 6, but quite last minute. So I needed a second guide, but there was no one around. It was peak season, there was nobody available. So I said, Philippe, we must find someone. I said, well, the only person I can find is this guy called Bernard, but he doesn't speak a word of English. So I said, well, that's okay. I'll translate. I'll come along and translate because I can speak French now. So
Yeah.
So that's how we met. So we met there, and it was a real love at first sight. We spent the whole mountain ignoring the clients and talking to each other, and I felt very guilty about it afterwards. But yeah, we got together pretty much. It was there. And just to reassure the clients, they came back, and I did speak to Gareth, the dad, and said, oh, apologise for ignoring you. Oh no, I didn't. That's fine. In fact, it was such a special time for us because actually our son, one of the sons, had got married and named one of the tables after the mountain. So it's now the Love Mountain.
That's very cool. What a great story. All right. So his name's Bernard. Is that right? Bernard?
Yeah.
Am I saying it right? Okay. Did he get involved with your business right away? I don't even know if he's involved with it now. So tell me a little bit about that.
So he's a high mountain guide, so he's independent, if you like. But he is the guide for all of our. Well, not that we use other guides as well, but he's the main. So he's like the head guide for all of our trips. Yeah. So his passion. He's a high mountain guide. So high mountain guide, if you don't know what a high mountain guide is, the sort of highest qualification in mountains that you can have. It's in Europe, I think. So they can do everything from climbing, via ferrata, canyoning, mountaineering, ice climbing, ski touring, ski mountaineering, anything basically that involves ropes and mountains and ice axes and crampons, those kind of things. So he can do all of those kind of things and climbing. And his passion is nature. So he's a real passionate nature watcher, and so that's how element has come into our holidays. So basically, it was a sort of, I got to know more about the mountains through Bernard, and it's a very complementary relationship. I do all of the office work now and all the organising and everything else, and he's the sort of mountain. So it's sort of grown. I don't know if I hadn't met Bernard where it would have gone. He's a big key to it because his local knowledge and his passion and all of that combined with my skills, which are basically organisational, well, not that great at marketing, but I try to be, all the office stuff, if you like. They've kind of, those 2 skill sets have come together, and that's what really is Undiscovered Mountains.
I think I'm just going to mention this. Maybe you've heard this before, but I think your skill set is your determination.
Well,
the organization stuff. Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of organized people. There's a lot of people that are good at office stuff. But that if somebody asks me what's Sally's superpower, it's not going to be, oh, she's organized. And, obviously from this conversation, it's just sheer determination. And that's obvious to anybody that's listening to this. And I want to ask you, really the reason you went on this climb with the clients and Bernard was because he didn't speak English. So has that changed?
Yeah, he now speaks English. Yeah, so
I figured that was the case, but I wanted to bring that up in case anybody heard you say he's the lead guide, and if they're still like, oh, I don't think he speaks English, but yeah, okay. So very cool.
And we have, and we have a son together. So we've now, the family unit is 4. So with my daughter and our son. So, but they're kind of, Annie's 20 now, and Tommy's 16, nearly 17. So yeah, they're both bilingual, and they both. Like my dream has come true. Like they're bilingual. They are both great skiers. They both climb. They both love the mountains. So yeah.
Look at
I've
you.
achieved what I set out to do.
That is so cool. What languages is, I don't even know how to say this in a bilingual relationship or what, like, what's the language of the house?
So it's probably, well, not probably, it is French. We speak French, and I speak English to the kids.
Okay. Is
So
that,
when we're all together, we speak French. And then sometimes I'll lapse into English if I want to say something quickly.
all right. All right. Very cool. Is that, I'm just curious, is that intentional that you speak English to the kids?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
So yeah, I think any bilingual family will tell you this. So when the kids are learning another language, if you want your children to learn another language, when they're little, they need to have someone that they associate with that language. So you should always speak in the same language to your children when they're growing up. So that, because then they separate the two languages, they associate English with mummy and French with daddy or papa, and that helps them to create the two language centers apparently in their brains.
That's cool. It makes absolute sense. It's something I never thought of, but it makes absolute sense. So tell me, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit more about the kids. They sound like a little older than kids, but you said they're both into the outdoors, doing that stuff. Can you? I know you don't want to speak for them. If you're like me, like somebody asked me, what does your son want to do? I don't know. Like, I mean, I know, but I don't want to put that pressure on him to answer that question directly myself. But what are your thoughts on your kids? Do you see them potentially working in the tourism business, or are they going different directions? Do you have any idea, or do you even want to discuss it?
Yeah, they're not going to work in the tourism industry.
Okay, it sounds like you know that.
They've already made their choices. So she's on learning. Well, she's training to be a doctor, so she's doing medicine studies.
Yeah.
And my son wants to be an engineer.
Okay. Very cool.
But they definitely do mountains in their spare time.
That's pretty neat. I think I've asked you, like, kind of what advice you would have given yourself. I think we gave a lot of good advice for people, but I'm just really inspired by your just tenacity and just like, this is my dream. This is my vision. Were there tricks, or is there something you can put your finger on that helped you stick through it other than just saying, well, it's what I wanted? It's what I always wanted. Were there tips or tricks or something that you were doing that kept you focused like that?
No, I think it is literally just the dream, but it's also having support as well. So I had good friends here. I made really good friends, despite the language problem. So I made good friends, and they really helped me to get there. And then obviously meeting Bernard, and when that all came together, that was really when it really started to sort of blossom, I would say. So I don't know how long I would have carried on in that kind of state of, that kind of loneliness bit before I cracked. I think there's a limit to how long you can do that for, and 3 years was long enough.
I'm not going to compare my struggles to yours, but I've been traveling for 4.5 years, basically a solo traveler, and I get the loneliness part, but I don't have a baby to take care of, and I'm I'm able to work remotely. So I can't even imagine what you were going through at that time. So I think that's why I'm so impressed. Very, very cool. What's next? Do you have anything exciting coming up here in the next couple of years? Any business changes or anything that's got you excited and focused?
So up until kind of reasonably recently, the whole purpose of Undiscovered Mountains was really just to have a lifestyle to bring my kids up, as I think you probably got that message. And now that they're starting to leave home, and I can see, like it's a different stage of life, and I've kind of realised that actually I do now know quite a lot about tourism, and I can build really good trips, and people come back, and I've got some amazing clients, like really lovely clients, and some great stories from clients that kind of keep coming back, and you're like, well, what are we going to do now? And I've done everything. So now my kind of goal is to build up the business, I suppose. So it's more than just a lifestyle business, so that so that we have a little team, and that that we can it can run also without me, so that I can take a step back and just keep. I mean, the thing that keeps me going doing the business is the clients. Is being able to we've got a recent story, like, because one of the activities that my first sort of passion activity was ski touring. That was one of the things that I really loved before I moved to the Alps, and wanted to carry on when now I'm into cross country skiing. But anyway, and we had a client called Andrew, who I think it was probably about 5 years ago now. He joined us for a ski touring trip, and he was, just about able to cope with the ski touring trip. He was like his ability was kind of at the bottom end of the group. He won't mind me saying this. And anyway, he struggled through, and he got through the end. He did it, and he was very proud of himself for doing the whole tour. And then he came back, but this time he came back prepared. He'd done loads of downhill skiing and loads of off piste, and he came back and was really prepared. And yeah, and it showed, and he was like loads better, and had a much better tour. And then it came back again. There's other people as well coming back, but he's sort of the kind of key thing. And he did the Haute route, which is kind of like I suppose it's one of the more, it's quite technical, it's quite hardcore ski touring, ski mountaineering, and we did that the more alpine version of it with carrying your skis on your back and walking up in crampons and glaciers, and quite technical and quite committing. And he was like, he wrote this review at the end saying something like, "This is the pinnacle of my ski touring experience. It's the best thing I've ever done in my life." Really kind of gushing, sort of like, he let his emotions out. I can't remember the exact, but this like really amazing review. It wasn't actually even in a review. It was written in an email, in a thank you email. And I'm now sitting in my bed with a cup of Earl's grey tea, having a hero's welcome. It was just like this amazing sort of like experience that he'd had. And I felt really, proud of that, because I felt that we were sort of, we were responsible for that. We introduced him his first ski tour. He then got better. He got the bug. He did this big challenge. And then the best bit of it all was that he then decided to bring his daughter on a ski touring trip and introduce his daughter and her boyfriend to ski touring whilst they were young enough, because he started it when he was in his 60s. He discovered ski touring as a retired person.
Wow. Okay.
So he was in his, well, I actually don't know how old he was, but he was retired. So he's like, I need to get, my kids into this before they get too old. And so they came this year, and we had a lovely ski tour with them. And they've now got the bug too. So yeah, those are the sort of stories that keep you going, and make it all worthwhile. Yeah.
I agree. And as I heard you saying that, I was thinking, if it was just the job, like, okay, we're going to put together this trip, we're going to take them up the mountain, we're going to drop them back off at their whatever. And they're never going to write a good review. They're never going to say thank you. They're never going to bring back their other family members. It's just the routine of we pick them up, we go do this, we bring them back, we never hear from them again. I think a lot of people would not want to do tourism anymore. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I know I had a hot air balloon ride business, and it was a lot of work to manage everything, get people out there, go do the thing. And if at the end of the day, they just shook my hand and said, okay, thanks, bye. So it wasn't worth the work. It was the reviews. And I think a lot of people in this business resonate. It's like, I would just sit there, I would just wanted to see the reviews and read the reviews. And they would say, how this was an amazing experience. I had people get engaged or married in the balloon or whatever. And without the reviews and those kudos, sometimes it wouldn't be worth the work. That's kind of what I hear you saying, is you really appreciate hearing that stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's the payment. That's where the job satisfaction comes from. Like, you put all this effort in, and you always go out of your way. You're always doing, and you're right. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to put together a trip. And when somebody appreciates that, and when you've made it like their life experience, or they've proposed on, like, these sort of big things, or someone's big birthday, and it's the best. Like, we recently had a client who got in touch with us and said to us, "Oh, we came on holiday about 10 years ago as a couple. It was the best holiday we've ever had, and we want to come back with our children."
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I love it.
And that is like, 10 years has passed, and they still think it's the best holiday they've ever had. Now, how many holidays have they had in that 10 years? And now they want to bring their kids. This is like a young couple bringing their younger family. It's not the same as the Andrew with his adult child. But that kind of thing, it's like, Yeah. You know,
It's hard to walk away from that, isn't it? What I hear you saying
yeah,
is you'd like to not have to do everything yourself, maybe grow the team you mentioned, so you don't have to be involved in everything. But it's a really, really hard thing to, I don't know if it's hard. It would be hard to just think, you know what, I'm done. I'm just going to close the business and go travel. For me, that would be hard.
yeah.
Right. So what I hear you saying is grow the team so you can continue to have those experiences and make those moments for people. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And just cherry pick, you know, what I do. So I'll go out with clients when they're doing something that I want to do, and with clients that I like because I like them because they've been before, and you know, and let the team do all of the, you know, ringing up and booking and all that kind of stuff.
So if you were to, not if, but when you expand the team, what's the first role or position that you would look to fill?
So I've got somebody who's just started in operations. So basically I'm selling, and then once the trip is sold, I then hand it over to them to do all of the booking, the accommodations, organising the guides, negotiating with the guides, creating, you know, putting it all together and creating the we have an app that we give to our clients, so creating that for the clients. So all of the kind of admin stuff, if you like. I'd love someone to do the marketing for me.
Yeah.
I find marketing is just like a kind of thing that just is just like a bottomless pit of you know, just never. Yeah, it's like, it's not a science, or that probably is a science, but it feels like it's there's no kind of right or wrong way of doing it, and lots of trial and error. I find that really hard.
I think that is the challenge with marketing, is there's so many things you could do, should do, would do. People tell you should do this, you should do that, and there's so many. Sometimes just like figuring out which one am I going to do and then actually stick to it is a challenge for me. I don't know if you have the same experience.
Exactly, it is a challenge, and the world of tourism, not just the world of tourism, but the world in general, has changed so much and is changing so radically still. Like, you know, with AI and everything else that's coming on board, you know, the way people make decisions has changed radically over the last few years, and it's going to change even more radically over the next few years. So keeping pace with that, and knowing that, you know, in tourism, when you're in tourism, you're in a global market. So you're competing globally with companies that have got billions of dollars of marketing budget, have, like, you know, teams of, you know, 100 people just doing social media, for example. You know, and when you're a small business, you can't compete with that. So, you know, you can't. There's no point even trying. So it's finding your way, you know, around this world where it seems like, you know, only the big companies have any power, and the little companies like ours, you've got to have a good client base. I think that's where it all comes from, a good client base and word of mouth. But then, you know, when you're just one destination, you know, there's a limit to how many times people can come back. I mean, you know, I have had people come back, like, you know, for like sort of 10 or 11 holidays, but, you know, I'm not surprised if they don't want to come back again. You know, you've done everything there is to do here now. You know, you might want to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is a challenge, and I haven't got the answer to the challenge. It's just a case of, yeah.
We're lucky in a sense that we've got access to so much information. We've got endless information at our fingertips, but at the same time, that means endless options and choices and decisions, and it just can get so overwhelming so fast. And even if you just go into ChatGPT or whatever, you know, I can go there on Tuesday and say, hey, help me come up with a marketing strategy. And then I go on Wednesday and I say, hey, help me come up with a marketing strategy for totally different things. Because there's so many options. And it's just like, it's so hard to just say, you know what, I got to ignore the noise and just figure out something that I can do consistently. And because it's tough. Anyway, so I hear you saying you'd like to get somebody to maybe do some of that marketing headache stuff for you. I get
so any marketing people out there that want to come and work for me for free.
We discussed the internship and what the great value of being an intern for a couple of years could do for somebody. So if you were listening earlier, this is your sign. Time to take advantage of that. Sally, so much fun. We discussed a bunch of things, and just I just love your just passion for creating the life that you created. I hope more than one, but I hope somebody is listening to this and somebody will make a difficult decision and go follow their vision and their dream and make it happen like you did. That's just super cool. But I want to ask you before we wrap up, is there anything that you wish I would have asked you? Anything I forgot to ask you? Or anything else you want to share with our listeners, either about you, philosophy of life, Undiscovered Mountains, France, Southern Alps, anything at all that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I think we've talked about everything.
Covered all that, didn't we?
Yeah, I think, yeah. I'll probably get off the phone and think, off the call and think, oh yeah, I should have said this or should have said that or whatever. But
we'll just have to come back and do it again. No problem. Sally, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about a different part of the world that I'm not that familiar with, but more importantly about you and your story. And it's super inspiring. I'm really, really happy we had this conversation. So thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And it was great. Yeah, and enjoyed it. It was fun.
Sounds good. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, Sally.
Thank you. Bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.